At my mother's funeral, my husband whispered to the woman beside him finally, "Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel." Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. I never thought I'd be writing this. Even now, weeks later, my hands shake when I try to put it all into words. But I need to. I need to make sense of what happened, because if I don't, I think I'll lose my mind completely. My mother died 3 weeks ago. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to death. Though those last 2 months were barely living at all. I watched her waste away in that hospital bed, her skin turning the color of old paper, her eyes sinking deeper into her skull with each passing day. But even then, even when she could barely speak, she'd reach for my hand and squeeze it with whatever strength she had left. My mother and I were everything to each other. I know that sounds dramatic, maybe even unhealthy to some people, but it's the truth. My father left when I was 4, just walked out one day and never came back. No note, no explanation, no child support. It was just the 2 of us after that. And Mom made sure I never felt the absence. She worked 2 jobs to put me through school. She sat through every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every swim meet. When I got my period for the first time and didn't understand what was happening, she held me and explained everything with such gentleness that I never felt ashamed. When I got my heart broken at 16, she let me cry on her shoulder for hours and fed me ice cream while we watched terrible rom-coms. She was my best friend, my confidant, my anchor. When I met David 7 years ago, Mom was thrilled. He was everything she'd hoped for me. Stable, kind, successful. A software engineer with a good job and better prospects. He treated me like I was precious, like I mattered. On our 3rd date, he brought flowers for my mother, too. That's when I knew he was special. He understood how important she was to me. He never complained when I'd spend weekends at her place, helping her with her garden or just sitting with her on the porch, talking about nothing and everything. When David proposed, he asked my mother's blessing first. She cried. I cried. We all cried together in her kitchen, and she hugged David so tight I thought she might break him. At our wedding, she gave the most beautiful speech about love and partnership and how proud she was of the woman I'd become. David held my hand through the whole thing, squeezing it gently when I started to tear up. That was 5 years ago. 5 years of what I thought was happiness, what I thought was real. When Mom got her diagnosis, David was incredible. He came with me to every doctor's appointment. He helped me research treatment options, find the best oncologists, understand the medical jargon that sounded like a foreign language. When the chemo started and Mom got too weak to live alone, David didn't even hesitate. He helped me move her into our spare bedroom. He never complained about the smell of sickness that permeated our home, or the sleepless nights when I'd sit by her bed, or the way our entire lives revolved around her medication schedule and doctor's visits. He was patient. He was supportive. He held me when I broke down in the shower, sobbing so hard I thought I might vomit. He told me over and over that we'd get through this together, that he was there for me, that he loved both me and my mother. I believed him. Those last 2 months were hell. The cancer spread faster than anyone expected. The doctors said there was nothing more they could do except keep her comfortable. Comfortable. What a word for dying. I took leave from work. I barely slept. I sat by her bed, holding her hand, reading to her from her favorite books, playing the old records she loved. David brought me food, made sure I ate, reminded me to shower, to sleep, to take care of myself. When she finally went, it was quiet. 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was dozing in the chair next to her bed when I felt her hand go slack in mine. Just like that. One moment she was breathing, shallow and raspy, and the next she wasn't. The silence was so loud it hurt. David found me there an hour later, still holding her hand, unable to let go. He gently pried my fingers loose and pulled me into his arms. I remember collapsing against him, all the strength just draining out of my body. He held me up. He called the hospice nurse. He handled everything while I just sat there, numb and hollow. The next few days were a blur. There were so many decisions to make, so many phone calls, so many arrangements. David took charge of most of it. He contacted the funeral home, helped me choose the casket, called relatives I hadn't spoken to in years to inform them of Mom's passing. He was everywhere, doing everything, being exactly what I needed him to be. I was grateful. God, I was so grateful. The funeral was on a Friday. Gray sky, light drizzle. Perfect pathetic fallacy, like the universe itself was mourning. David helped me get dressed that morning. I couldn't seem to manage buttons or zippers. My hands wouldn't work right. He zipped up my black dress, fixed my hair, held my face in his hands, and told me I was strong, that I could do this, that he'd be right there beside me the entire time. We drove to the funeral home in silence. I stared out the window, watching the city blur past, and thought about how this was it. This was the day I'd say goodbye to my mother forever. The finality of it was crushing. There would be no more phone calls, no more Sunday dinners, no more of her laugh or her advice or the way she'd say my name. Just memory and absence. The funeral home was exactly what you'd expect. Hushed voices, the cloying smell of lilies, too many people in too much black. David kept his hand on the small of my back as we walked in, guiding me, supporting me. People came up to offer condolences. I shook hands, accepted hugs, heard words that meant nothing. I'm so sorry for your loss. She was a wonderful woman. She's in a better place now. None of it meant anything. None of it brought her back. The viewing was the worst part. Seeing her lying there in that satin-lined box, wearing the blue dress she'd bought for my wedding, her hands folded across her chest. She looked like a wax figure of herself. Not real. Not my mother. I stood there for I don't know how long, staring down at her, waiting for her chest to rise and fall, for her eyes to open, for this nightmare to end. David stood beside me the entire time, his arm around my waist. I leaned into him, needing his strength because I had none of my own left. The service started at 2. I sat in the front row, David on my right. The funeral director had done a good job arranging everything. There were photos of Mom displayed on easels throughout the room, spanning her entire life. Baby pictures, her high school graduation, her holding me as a newborn, the two of us at my college graduation, her at my wedding. A whole life in pictures. I couldn't look at them for long. It hurt too much. The pastor spoke about eternal life and God's plan and comfort in times of sorrow. I didn't hear most of it. My mind was somewhere else, somewhere gray and empty. I felt David's hand cover mine, warm and solid, and I held on to it like a lifeline. People came up to say a few words, my mother's sister, whom she'd been estranged from for years but who showed up anyway. My mother's best friend from her book club, who could barely get through her speech for crying. A few of her co-workers from the hospital where she'd worked as a nurse. They all said beautiful things about her kindness, her generosity, her strength. I was supposed to speak too, but when the time came, I couldn't do it. I stood up, walked to the podium, looked out at all those faces, and the words just died in my throat. After what felt like an eternity, David came up beside me, put his arm around my shoulders, and gently guided me back to my seat. No one judged me for it. Grief, someone told me later, needs no apology. Then came the final viewing before they closed the casket. This was it. The last time I'd ever see my mother's face. I stood, David helping me to my feet, and walked up to her one more time. I touched her hand. It was cold and hard, nothing like the hand that had held mine my entire life. I whispered that I loved her, that I'd miss her every day, that I hoped she was at peace. I don't know how long I stood there. Time had stopped meaning anything. Eventually, David's hand on my elbow urged me gently back to my seat. The funeral director stepped forward to close the casket. This was the moment, the final, irrevocable moment. I felt something inside me cracking, breaking apart. I gripped the armrests of my chair so hard my knuckles went white. And that's when I heard it. There was a woman sitting in the row behind us, slightly to the right. I hadn't paid much attention to her during the service. Just another mourner in black. But as the funeral director's hands moved toward the casket lid, David leaned slightly back and to the side, toward her, and he whispered so quietly that I almost didn't catch it. Finally. The word hung in the air between us like smoke. Finally. I felt everything inside me freeze. My breath stopped. My heart stopped. Time itself seemed to stop. Finally? I must have heard wrong. I must have. There was no way, no possible way that my husband had just said that at my mother's funeral. At the moment they were closing her casket. No way. But the word echoed in my head, repeating over and over. Finally. 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 I turned my head, just slightly, just enough to see David out of the corner of my eye. He was looking forward, his face composed, appropriate, the mask of a grieving son-in-law. But there was something else there, too. Something I couldn't quite identify. Relief? My stomach turned over. I wanted to turn around to see who he'd been talking to, but I couldn't move. The funeral director had closed the casket. The lid came down with a soft, final thump that seemed to echo through the entire room. My mother was gone. Hidden. Sealed away forever. And my husband had said, finally. The rest of the service passed in a blur. We proceeded to the cemetery for the burial. I rode in the car with David, sitting next to him but feeling like there was a canyon between us. He held my hand. I let him, but I didn't squeeze back. My mind was spinning, racing, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. Maybe I'd misheard. Maybe he'd said something else. Maybe he'd been clearing his throat or saying something to himself. Maybe the grief was making me hear things that weren't there. But I knew. Deep down, in that place where we always know the truth we're too afraid to acknowledge, I knew I'd heard correctly. At the cemetery, we stood around the grave while they lowered the casket into the ground. The drizzle had turned into proper rain. People huddled under umbrellas. David held one over both of us, his arm around my shoulders. To anyone watching, we were the picture of a devoted couple united in grief. But I couldn't stop thinking about that word. Finally. I scanned the crowd, looking for the woman who'd been sitting behind us. There were so many people. Too many. And they all looked the same in their dark clothes and somber faces. I couldn't find her. The pastor said the final words. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. People came forward to drop flowers and handfuls of dirt onto the casket. When it was my turn, I stood at the edge of the grave, looking down at the box that held my mother, and felt nothing. The numbness had spread through my entire body, anesthetizing even my grief. David guided me away. We stood under an oak tree while people came to offer their final condolences. I shook hands and accepted hugs mechanically, barely registering faces or words. My mind was elsewhere. And then I saw her. She was standing apart from the main group, near the edge of the cemetery. Tall, slim, probably in her early 40s. Dark hair pulled back in a sleek bun. Expensive-looking black dress and heels. She was watching me. When our eyes met, she didn't look away. Instead, she gave me a small, sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. Something in my chest tightened. I watched as David excused himself, saying he was going to check on something with the funeral director. But he didn't head toward the funeral director. He walked toward the woman. She met him halfway. They stood together, not touching, but closer than strangers. They spoke quietly. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see David's face. There was something in his expression I'd never seen before, an intimacy, a familiarity. My legs moved before I knew what I was doing. I walked toward them, my heels sinking into the soft grass with each step. They saw me coming. The woman's expression didn't change, but David's did. Guilt flashed across his face, there and gone in an instant, replaced by concern. "Honey," he said, reaching for me. "Are you okay? You should sit down. This has been such a hard day." I ignored his outstretched hand and looked at the woman. Up close, I could see she was beautiful. Not in a flashy way, but elegant, composed. The kind of woman who belonged in boardrooms and expensive restaurants. "Who are you?" I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat, empty. The woman looked at David, then back at me. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said. Her voice was soft, cultured. "Your mother was a remarkable woman." "You knew my mother?" I asked. Something flickered in her eyes. "Not well, but David has told me so much about her." David has told me so much about her. The words hit me like a physical blow. "How do you know my husband?" I heard myself ask. Another glance between them. A whole conversation happening in that look. "We work together," the woman said smoothly. "I'm Jennifer Cole. I've been working with David on the Morrison project for the past year." The Morrison project. David had mentioned it. Long hours, lots of travel, important for his career. I'd been supportive. I'd told him I understood when he had to stay late or go on business trips. I'd been dealing with my mother's illness, and I hadn't wanted to burden him with needing attention too. Oh God. "It's nice to meet you," I said. The words automatic, meaningless. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," Jennifer said. "I wanted to pay my respects." She touched David's arm just briefly, a gesture that could have been professional but somehow wasn't. "I should go. I'll see you Monday." And she walked away, her heels clicking on the path. I stood there watching her go and felt something inside me break completely. Not dramatically, not with tears or screaming or collapse. Just a quiet, internal fracture, like ice cracking under weight. "We should get back," David said gently. "People are waiting." I let him lead me back to the reception area where they'd set up coffee and sandwiches. I sat in a chair and stared at nothing while people milled around me. David brought me tea. I didn't drink it. Finally. The word kept playing in my head, over and over, like a scratched record. Finally. What did it mean? Finally she's dead? Finally it's over? Finally we can be together? I felt sick. That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, I lay in bed next to David and stared at the ceiling. He was asleep or pretending to be. I could hear his steady breathing in the darkness. I tried to make sense of it. Tried to find an innocent explanation. Maybe finally had meant something else entirely? Maybe Jennifer had been saying something to him and he was agreeing. Maybe it had nothing to do with my mother at all. But I couldn't convince myself. The pieces were starting to fit together in a picture I didn't want to see. The late nights at work, the business trips, the way he'd encouraged me to spend so much time caring for my mother. "Stay with her as much as you need," he'd said. "I'll be fine here. Don't worry about me." Had he wanted me gone? Had he wanted my mother gone? I thought about Jennifer Cole, the way they'd looked at each other, the familiarity, the intimacy. How long had it been going on? I got out of bed carefully, quietly. David didn't stir. I went into his study and turned on his computer. I knew his password. We'd never had secrets, or so I'd thought. His email was open. I scrolled through his inbox, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Work emails, spam, newsletters. And then I found the folder, buried in his personal folders, labeled M Project. Morrison Project, I thought at first. But when I opened it, I knew that wasn't what the M stood for. The emails went back 2 years. 2 years of messages between David and Jennifer. At first, they were professional. then friendly, then flirtatious, then explicitly sexual. I read them all, every single one. Each message another knife in my chest. They'd started their affair 18 months ago. Secret meetings at hotels, stolen afternoons, business trips that were really romantic getaways. And then, 6 months ago, the messages changed tone. "How much longer?" Jennifer wrote. "I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of being the secret." David's response. "Soon, I promise. Just a few more months. We need to be patient." "Patient?" Jennifer wrote back. "I've been patient for over a year. I want a real relationship. I want to be able to go out in public with you. I want to meet your friends. I don't want to be hidden anymore." "I know," David replied. "I know, and I want that too. But right now, with everything happening with her mother, I can't. It would destroy her. We need to wait until after. Until after my mother died." I kept reading, my vision blurring with tears. I didn't realize I was crying. "She's so focused on her mother right now," David wrote. "She barely even notices I'm there. It's like I'm invisible in my own home. Everything is about her mother's cancer, her mother's treatment, her mother's needs. I'm just the support system, the helper, nothing more." Jennifer's response. "I'm sorry, baby. That must be so hard for you. But it won't be much longer, right? The doctor said she only has a few months left." Only has a few months left. They'd been waiting for my mother to die. I found an email from 3 weeks ago, the day before my mother died. "Any day now," David wrote. "The hospice nurse says it could be any time. And then finally we can start our life together. Finally, I'll be free." Finally. There it was. The word that had shattered my world, explained in black and white on a computer screen. I sat there for a long time, reading and rereading the emails, trying to make them say something different than what they said. But the words didn't change. The truth didn't change. My husband had been having an affair for 18 months. My husband had been waiting for my mother to die so he could leave me. My husband had whispered, "finally," at her funeral because her death meant he was free to be with his mistress. He'd held me while I cried. He'd helped me bathe my dying mother. He'd stood beside me at her funeral. And the whole time he'd been counting down the days until she was gone so he could leave me for another woman. The betrayal was so complete, so total that I couldn't even process it properly. It was too big, too devastating. I heard footsteps behind me. David appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice soft with fake concern. I looked at him. This man I'd loved. This man I'd trusted. This stranger. "I heard you," I said quietly. "At the funeral. When they were closing the casket. You said finally." He went very still. I watched the color drain from his face. "You heard me?" he whispered. "I heard you," I confirmed, and I found the emails. The silence that followed was infinite. I watched emotions flicker across his face. Shock, fear, calculation, resignation. "I can explain," he said finally. "Can you?" I asked. My voice was still eerily calm. I felt disconnected from my body, like I was watching this scene from somewhere far away. "Can you explain how you've been fucking someone else for 18 months? Can you explain how you waited for my mother to die so you could leave me? Can you explain how you stood beside me at her funeral and comforted me while you were relieved she was finally gone?" "It's not like that," David said, but his words were weak, unconvincing. "Then what is it like?" I asked. "Tell me, David. Explain it to me. Make me understand." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," I said. "You are." "Things just happened," he said helplessly. "With Jennifer. We connected. And you and we'd been drifting apart for so long. Ever since your mother got sick, it's like you forgot I existed. It was always about her. Her needs, her care, her illness. Where was I in all of that? I stared at him. My mother was dying. I know that, he said, frustration creeping into his voice. I know that, and I tried to be supportive. I really did. But it's been 6 months of living in a hospice. 6 months of your entire world revolving around her. 6 months of being treated like a caretaker instead of a husband. So you fucked someone else? I said flatly. He flinched. It wasn't like that. It started before your mother got sick. Jennifer and I, we just clicked. And then when the diagnosis came and you needed me to be strong, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't add to your pain. So I waited. I thought after she passed, after you'd had time to grieve, we could talk about our relationship, about whether we were really happy. After she passed, I repeated. You mean after she died? After my mother died, you were going to leave me. I don't know, David said, and at least that sounded honest. I don't know what I was going to do. I was confused. I am confused. I love you, but I also have feelings for Jennifer. And these past months, living in this house of death, watching you disappear into your grief, I needed something for myself. Someone who saw me, who wanted to be with me. I wanted to be with you, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. I always wanted to be with you. I was dealing with the worst thing that ever happened to me, and I thought you were there supporting me because you loved me, because that's what partners do. I did support you, David said. I was there every day. You were counting down the days until my mother died, I said, the tears finally coming. You were waiting for her death like it was a prison sentence ending. And at her funeral, when they closed her casket, when I was saying goodbye to the most important person in my life, you whispered finally to your mistress. I'm sorry, David said, and he sounded like he meant it. I'm so sorry. That was cruel. I didn't mean for you to hear that. You didn't mean for me to hear that, I repeated. Not that you didn't mean to say it. You didn't mean for me to hear it. He didn't respond. I stood up, my legs shaky. Get out. What? Get out, I said again, louder this time. Get out of this house. Get out of my life. Go to Jennifer. That's what you want, right? You're finally free, so go. Can we please talk about this? David pleaded. You're in shock. You've just lost your mother. Let's not make any rash decisions. Rash decisions? I laughed, and it came out harsh and bitter. You've been having an affair for 18 months and waiting for my mother to die. How is me asking you to leave rash? Where will I go? He asked, and the absurdity of the question, the selfishness of it, made me want to scream. I don't care, I said. Go to Jennifer, go to a hotel, go to hell. Just get out of my house. It's my house too, he said, and there it was. The flash of anger, of self-righteousness. I paid for half of it. Fine, I said. Stay. I'll leave. I walked past him and into our bedroom. I pulled a suitcase out of the closet and started throwing clothes into it. David followed me, still talking, still trying to explain, still trying to make this somehow my fault for being too focused on my dying mother. I tuned him out. I packed mechanically, not really paying attention to what I was taking. When the suitcase was full, I zipped it up and grabbed my purse. Where are you going? David asked. Away from you, I said. I walked out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and out the front door. David called after me, but I didn't stop. I threw my suitcase in the car and drove. I didn't have a destination. I just drove, through the dark streets while my mind replayed everything. Every moment of the past 6 months, recolored by this new knowledge. Every time David had been supportive, I now wondered if he'd been resentful. Every time he'd held me while I cried, I wondered if he'd been thinking about Jennifer. Had any of it been real? Had he ever really loved me, or had I been convenient? The woman who took care of things, who didn't demand too much, who was grateful for scraps of attention? I thought about my mother, about how proud she'd been when David proposed, about how much she'd loved him, about how she'd died thinking I was in a happy marriage, secure, loved. If she'd known the truth, it would have broken her heart. Maybe that's why the betrayal hurt so much. It wasn't just losing David. It was realizing that my mother had died believing a lie, that the last chapter of her life had been built on a foundation of deception, that she'd suffered and died thinking her daughter was taken care of, when really, her daughter's husband was just waiting for her to die so he could leave. I ended up at a hotel. Not a nice one, just a generic chain off the highway. I checked in, went to my room, and sat on the bed in the dark. And finally, I let myself cry. Not the quiet, dignified tears I'd shed at the funeral. Huge, ugly, gasping sobs that shook my entire body. I cried for my mother. I cried for my marriage. I cried for the future I'd thought I had. I cried until I had nothing left. Until I was hollow and empty. In the morning, I called my mother's sister, Aunt Linda. We weren't close, but she was the only family I had left. I need help, I told her. She came. She drove 2 hours from her home and met me at the hotel. I told her everything. About David, about Jennifer, about the emails, finally. She held my hand and listened, her face growing harder with each word. "What do you want to do?" she asked when I was done. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know anything anymore." "Do you want to try to work it out with him?" she asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Could I forgive David? Could I move past this? Maybe, if it had been just the affair. Maybe if he'd been weak, if he'd made a mistake, if he'd genuinely been sorry. But he'd waited for my mother to die. He'd stood at her funeral and felt relief at her passing. That wasn't weakness. That was calculated. That was cruel. "No," I said. "I don't want to work it out." "Then we'll get you a lawyer," Aunt Linda said firmly. "A good one. And we'll make sure that bastard pays for what he's done." Over the next few weeks, I moved in with Aunt Linda. I hired a lawyer. I filed for divorce. David tried to call me repeatedly. He sent texts, emails, even showed up at Aunt Linda's house once. I didn't speak to him. My lawyer did all the talking. He tried to claim that I'd abandoned him by leaving, that I was being unreasonable, that we should try counseling. My lawyer sent him copies of the emails he'd exchanged with Jennifer. After that, his lawyer stopped fighting quite so hard. The divorce is still ongoing. It's been 3 months now. 3 months since my mother died. 3 months since my world collapsed. People keep telling me I'm strong, that I'm handling this well, that my mother would be proud of how I'm coping. But I don't feel strong. I feel broken. I feel like someone reached inside me and ripped out everything essential and left me hollow. I miss my mother every single day. I miss her so much it's like a physical pain. I want to call her and tell her what happened. I want her advice, her comfort, her unconditional love. And I'm so angry. Angry at David for his betrayal. Angry at Jennifer for knowingly destroying my marriage. Angry at the universe for taking my mother when I needed her most. But mostly, I'm angry at myself. For not seeing it. For being so blind. For trusting so completely. There were signs, I know that now. The late nights at work that became more frequent. The business trips. The way he'd be texting someone and quickly put his phone away when I walked in the room. The way he'd encouraged me to spend more and more time caring for my mother. I'd thought he was being supportive, understanding, giving me space to be there for my mother in her final months. Really, he'd just wanted me out of the way. Last week, I drove past our house. My house now, technically, though I haven't been back since that night. Through the lawyer, we'd agreed that David would move out and I'd buy out his half of the property. There was a for sale sign in the yard. I can't live there anymore. Too many memories, too many ghosts. Every room reminds me of either my mother dying or my marriage dying. I can't separate the two types of grief. They're tangled together, inseparable. So I'm selling it. Starting over. Rebuilding from scratch. I don't know what that looks like yet. I don't know who I am anymore. Without my mother, without my marriage, without the life I thought I was living. But I'm learning. I'm learning that I'm stronger than I thought. That I can survive losing everything. That I can wake up every morning, even when waking up feels impossible. I'm learning that grief is not linear. Some days I'm okay. Some days I can't get out of bed. Some days I'm furious. Some days I'm just numb. I'm learning that betrayal is a specific kind of grief all its own. It's not just losing someone. It's realizing they were never really there in the first place. I'm learning that it's okay to not be okay. I heard through a friend that David and Jennifer are living together now. Apparently, they didn't waste any time making their relationship public once the divorce proceedings started. I try not to think about it. I try not to imagine them together. I try not to wonder if she's worth it, if she was worth destroying our marriage and disrespecting my mother's memory. Sometimes I succeed. Sometimes I don't. I found something last week when I was going through boxes from my mother's house. A letter sealed in an envelope with my name on it, written in her shaky handwriting from near the end. I'd been avoiding going through her things. It was too painful. But Aunt Linda convinced me that I needed to, that leaving everything in boxes wasn't healthy. I opened the letter with shaking hands. My darling girl. It began. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I had to leave you. I'm sorry I can't be there for all the moments still to come. But I need you to know how proud I am of you. How much I love you. How brave and strong and beautiful you are. I had to stop reading for a minute. Just seeing her handwriting, knowing these were probably some of the last words she ever wrote, broke something open inside me. I know you're probably feeling lost right now. The letter continued. I know losing me is going to hurt, but you're going to be okay. You're going to survive this. You're stronger than you think you are. More tears. I need to tell you something, and I don't know if I'll have the chance to say it in person. If I do, this letter will be redundant. If I don't, then you need to hear it. Be careful with David. My heart stopped. I love him, and I'm so glad you found him. But lately, something has felt off. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Maybe it's the medication making me see things that aren't there. But he's been different these past few months. Distant. Like he's somewhere else even when he's here. I tried to talk to you about it, but you were so stressed, and I didn't want to add to your burden with what might just be a dying woman's delusions. I read the words over and over. If I'm wrong, ignore this. If I'm right, remember that you deserve better. You deserve someone who loves you the way you love them. Someone who sees you as the amazing woman you are. Someone who will be there in the hard times, not just the easy ones. I love you, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. And no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. You're my daughter. You have my strength in you. Use it. The letter was signed with her name and a heart. I sat on the floor of Aunt Linda's guest room and cried. My mother had known. Maybe not the details, maybe not about Jennifer specifically, but she'd sensed something was wrong. She'd tried to warn me, even from her deathbed, and I'd been too blind to see it. But she'd also given me something else. Permission to survive. A reminder that I was strong, that I had her strength in me. I'd been so focused on what I'd lost that I'd forgotten what I still had. My mother's love didn't die with her. It was still there, woven into who I was, part of my very foundation. David had betrayed me. He'd waited for my mother to die. He'd whispered, finally, at her funeral. But he couldn't take away what my mother had given me. 29 years of unconditional love. 29 years of knowing I was valued, cherished, important. 29 years of being someone's whole world. David could never understand that. He'd never been anyone's whole world. He'd never loved anyone the way my mother loved me. And maybe that's why he'd been able to betray me so easily. Because he didn't understand what real love looked like. I kept my mother's letter. I read it every morning when I wake up and every night before I go to sleep. It reminds me that I'm not alone, even though she's gone. That her love continues, even in her absence. Yesterday, I went back to the house for the first time since that night. The realtor needed me to go through and decide what I wanted to keep and what would stay for staging. It was harder than I expected. Everywhere I looked, I saw memories. My mother in the kitchen, teaching me to make her famous lasagna. David and me on the couch, watching movies on Friday nights. My mother's hospital bed in the spare room, the room where she'd taken her last breath. I packed quickly, efficiently. I took the things that mattered. Photo albums, my mother's jewelry, a few pieces of furniture that had been in my family for generations. I left everything else. As I was leaving, I took one last look around. This house had been supposed to be my forever home. The place where David and I would raise our children, grow old together, build a life. Instead, it became a mausoleum, a monument to death and betrayal. I locked the door and didn't look back. The divorce should be final in a few more months. David's lawyer tried to argue for alimony, which would have been laughable if it wasn't so insulting. My lawyer shut that down quickly with evidence of his infidelity. I'll get the house, the savings, and my dignity. David will get his freedom and Jennifer. I think I got the better deal. I've started seeing a therapist. Twice a week, I sit in her comfortable office and talk about grief and betrayal and loss and anger. She's helping me untangle all the complicated emotions, helping me understand that it's okay to grieve my marriage at the same time I'm grieving my mother. That the two losses are separate, even if they feel connected. She's also helping me see that David's betrayal wasn't about me. It wasn't because I wasn't good enough or pretty enough or attentive enough. It was about his own weaknesses, his own selfishness, his own inability to be the person he'd promised to be. That's hard to accept. It's easier in some ways to believe it was my fault. That if I'd been different, better, more, he wouldn't have strayed. But my therapist is patient. She keeps reminding me that I am not responsible for someone else's choices, that I cannot control other people's actions, only my own responses. I'm trying to believe her. I've also started going through my mother's things more systematically. Aunt Linda helps me. We spend Sunday afternoons sorting through boxes, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. It's painful but necessary. And sometimes we find treasures. Love letters my father wrote to my mother before he left, which made me realize that maybe their love was real once, before it wasn't. Recipes in my mother's handwriting. Report cards from my childhood. Every single one saved. Every achievement documented. My mother kept everything. Every drawing I made in kindergarten. Every school photo. Every award and certificate and ribbon. Evidence of a life, of love, of paying attention. I wonder if anyone will keep these things about David and Jennifer. If anyone will document their love story. Somehow I doubt it. Relationships built on betrayal have shaky foundations. Last week, I ran into Jennifer at the grocery store. I almost didn't recognize her out of context, out of her funeral clothes. She was in the produce section examining avocados. She saw me at the same moment I saw her. For a second, we both froze. Then she did something I didn't expect. She walked over to me. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. Every instinct screamed at me to walk away, to ignore her, to maintain my dignity and not engage. But I was curious. I wanted to hear what she had to say. "Fine," I said. "Talk." She looked uncomfortable, which gave me a small, petty satisfaction. "I want to apologize," she said. "For everything. For my part in what happened." "Your part," I repeated. "You mean sleeping with my husband?" She flinched. "Yes. I know it was wrong. I knew he was married. I fell in love with him. And he said you two were already having problems, that the marriage was over, that he was going to leave you anyway." "He was lying," I said flatly. "We weren't having problems. Or at least I didn't think we were. The only problem was that my mother was dying, and I was focused on caring for her. Jennifer looked down at her hands. I know that now. He told me. He made it sound different. Like you'd grown apart. Like you barely had a relationship anymore. Did he tell you he was waiting for my mother to die so he could leave me? I asked. Did he tell you he whispered finally at her funeral? Her eyes widened. He said that? You were there, I said. You must have heard it. I thought... She trailed off, then tried again. I thought he was talking about the service being over. About finally being able to leave the funeral. I laughed bitterly. How convenient for you. I'm sorry, she said again. I really am. If I'd known the full truth, if I'd understood what was really happening, I wouldn't have. I don't know what I would have done differently. But I would have done something differently. Would you? I asked. Would you really? Or would you have just felt a little more guilty while doing exactly the same thing? She didn't answer. I don't forgive you, I told her. I don't forgive him either. You both made choices. You both knew those choices would hurt me. And you did it anyway. So no, I don't forgive you. I understand, Jennifer said softly. Good, I said. Now if you'll excuse me, I have shopping to do. I walked away, my head held high, even though my hands were shaking. Later, Aunt Linda asked me if I felt better or worse after confronting Jennifer. Neither, I said honestly. Just tired. I'm tired a lot these days. Grief is exhausting. Rebuilding is exhausting. Getting up every morning and choosing to keep going is exhausting. But I do it. Every single day I do it. Because my mother didn't raise a quitter. She didn't raise someone who would let betrayal destroy her. She raised someone strong, someone capable, someone who could survive anything. I'm trying to be that person. Some days I succeed. Some days I fail spectacularly. But I keep trying. The house sold last week. I got a good price for it. Enough to buy a small condo closer to Aunt Linda and still have money left over. A fresh start in a place with no memories, no ghosts. I move in next month. I've been planning how to decorate it, what furniture to buy, how to make it feel like home. It's strange, starting over at 29. I thought by now I'd have everything figured out. Instead, I'm starting from scratch. But maybe that's okay. Maybe starting over means I get to decide who I want to be, without the weight of other people's expectations. I've been thinking about going back to school. I've always wanted to get my master's degree, but there was never time. First I was working, then I was married, then Mom got sick. There was always a reason to wait. But I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want my life to be about waiting for the right time, because I've learned that the right time might never come. I want to live. Fully. Completely without hesitation. My mother taught me that. Not through her life, but through her death. She ran out of time. She didn't get to do all the things she wanted to do. See all the places she wanted to see. But I still have time. I'm 29 years old. I have my whole life ahead of me. Yes, it's a different life than the one I planned. Yes, it's scarred by loss and betrayal. But it's still mine. It's still full of possibility. Last night, I had the first dream about my mother that wasn't a nightmare. Usually when I dream about her, I wake up crying, aching with loss. But last night I dreamed we were in her garden, the one she loved so much. She was healthy, whole, laughing. We were planting flowers together, our hands in the dirt. You're going to be okay, she told me in the dream. Better than okay. You're going to be extraordinary. I woke up and, for the first time in months, I believed it. I still miss her every day. I still have moments where I forget she's gone and reach for my phone to call her. I still cry sometimes, suddenly and without warning, when something reminds me of her. But I'm starting to remember the joy too, not just the loss. I'm starting to think about her laugh instead of just her last breath. I'm starting to honor her memory by living the life she wanted for me, a life full of strength and purpose and love. As for David, I heard through a mutual friend that things aren't going well with Jennifer. Apparently, the reality of their relationship isn't as exciting as the fantasy was. Apparently, when you build a relationship on betrayal, it's hard to trust each other. I don't feel vindicated hearing this. I just feel sad. Sad that so much pain came from something so fundamentally pointless. Sad that my mother died thinking I was in a loving marriage. Sad that David threw away something real for something that was always going to be hollow. But that's his journey, not mine. Mine is forward. Always forward. The divorce will be final in 6 weeks. 6 weeks until I'm legally free. Until I can close this chapter completely and start the next one. I'm not sure what that next chapter looks like yet, but I'm learning to be okay with uncertainty. I'm learning that not having all the answers doesn't mean you're lost. My mother used to say that the hardest thing about being a parent was watching your child hurt and not being able to fix it. She said it when I got my heart broken at 16, and she said it again when she was dying. I won't be here to help you through the hard times anymore, she told me near the end, and that kills me more than the cancer does. You've already taught me everything I need to know, I told her, holding her hand. You've already given me everything. I didn't realize how true that was until she was gone, until I had to face the hardest thing I'd ever faced without her. But she was right. She had given me everything. The strength to survive. The courage to start over. The knowledge that I was loved completely, unconditionally, eternally. That doesn't go away just because she did. So I keep going. I keep getting up. I keep moving forward. For her. For myself. For the life she wanted me to have. David took a lot from me. My marriage, my trust, my sense of security. He turned one of the worst days of my life into something even worse with one whispered word. Finally. But he couldn't take everything. He couldn't take my mother's love. He couldn't take my strength. He couldn't take my future. Those are still mine. They'll always be mine. And someday, maybe not soon, but someday I'll whisper my own finally. Finally healed. Finally whole. Finally free. Finally living the life I was always meant to live. The one my mother dreamed for me. Not the life I planned. But maybe, just maybe, something better. I'm not there yet. I'm still in the middle of the storm, still picking up the pieces, still figuring out who I am without her, without him, without the identity I built around being a daughter and a wife. But I will get there. I know I will. Because I am my mother's daughter. And my mother didn't raise someone who stayed broken. She raised someone who knew how to rebuild. So that's what I'm doing. One day at a time. One breath at a time. Rebuilding. And when I'm done, when I've built something new and beautiful from the rubble of what was, I hope she'll be proud. I hope she'll look down from wherever she is and see that her love was enough. That even in death, even in loss, even in the worst betrayal, her love was enough to carry me through. Because in the end, that's what matters. Not David's betrayal, not Jennifer's apology, not even my own pain. What matters is that I was loved completely, that I learned how to love completely, that I carry that love forward into whatever comes next. Finally, I understand that. Finally, I see the gift my mother gave me, even in dying. The gift of knowing what real love looks like. So I'll never settle for anything less again. Finally, I'm ready to move forward. Not forgetting, never forgetting. But no longer trapped in that moment at the funeral when everything changed. Finally, I'm ready to live. 3 months later, I moved into my new place today. It's small, a 1-bedroom condo on the 3rd floor of a building near Aunt Linda's house. The walls are white and bare. The rooms are empty except for the few pieces of furniture I kept. It doesn't look like much yet, but it's mine. All mine. No memories of David. No ghost of my mother dying in the spare room. Just blank space, waiting to be filled. I stood in the middle of the empty living room and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Tomorrow I start my master's program. Next week I begin volunteering at the hospice where my mother spent her last days, helping other people navigate the hardest journey of their lives. And somewhere down the line, maybe I'll love again. Maybe I'll trust again. Maybe I'll build something new with someone who understands what it means to be truly present, truly committed, truly there. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll build a life that's complete all on its own, that doesn't need another person to make it whole. Either way, I'll be okay. Because I'm not the woman I was 6 months ago, standing at my mother's funeral with my husband's betrayal echoing in my ears. I'm not even the woman I was 3 months ago, broken and hollow and barely surviving. I'm someone new, someone stronger, someone who knows the difference between real love and empty promises. Someone who knows that finally can mean an ending or a beginning, depending on how you choose to see it. For David, finally meant relief, escape, freedom from obligation. For me, finally means something different. Finally, I understand my worth. Finally, I see the truth. Finally, I'm ready to live without fear of losing everything, because I already lost everything and survived. Finally, I'm free. And that's something no one can take away.